we on?
We're on.
Okay, go for it. Oh,
This
sorry.
is called doing live segments during COVID with all 100% volunteers and no producing experience. Welcome, everyone. Welcome so much. It is Thursday, June 4th, and it's amazing. We're here with a dear friend from my childhood. She actually was my neighbor and lived, was it 2 or 3 doors down?
3, I think.
3 doors down.
Yeah.
And what we found this week, and I think what my friend and co-host Alexis Dixon has discovered, is just a very special neighborhood and a very special island and town where we grew up, Alameda, California. And so this whole week has really highlighted the kids we grew up with and just exploring our roots and realizing how important community is and how important family is. So welcome, Mari. I know can we say what's going on?
Yeah.
You're expecting, we're super excited. 7 months pregnant, and you're also sheltering in place, and you have a 5-year-old. So thank you for taking the time. It really means a lot.
I'm happy to be here, Amanda. Yeah, and Alexis. Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks for coming.
So the first thing I thought was interesting is we grew up together, and we danced together. We went to the same school, and we also went to, remember singing class?
Oh yeah.
In that little church.
Yep.
I
I borrowed a dress from you for prom. I thought about that today.
Oh my goodness. And I also, one of the things I remember was going into your backyard, and you had the herb garden. You guys were so ahead of your time, right?
Hippie parents. I mean, yeah.
Had fresh herbs in the backyard. So we really had an amazing childhood. And I think the bonds were just so strong. And I think a lot of it was our family. So when I was thinking today and about this segment, I thought, wow, we've remained in contact, but I've seen a lot of your life through the public lens, through social media, and then also through the lens of your father.
Yeah, my unpaid PR rep, my dad. Yeah.
Right. And so at the cafe, it's so funny because if I'm like, I need a day off, and everyone's like, oh my God, your dad is like the best publicist in the world.
Yeah.
So I just think it's super interesting to have followed you on these different platforms. How's it been? How important is family to you and your parents? I mean, you come from all of your brothers and sisters are all in the business as well.
I mean, I think we came from similar families, like a lot of kids allowed artistic household. I have a younger brother and sister, but my kind of cloudy memories of what my childhood was like was the door always being open and just like kids from the neighborhood always running through our house, and a sort of really nice chaos all the time. And I'm really, really close with my whole family still. My brother and I collaborate. He's been my composer for all 3 of the movies I've made. And my sister's a writer in the business and a comedian. And, our parents are like over the moon proud and total supporters. And they feel like people ask them all the time, like, how did you end up with 3 artist kids? And they're like, I don't know. But the truth is they just didn't.
3 successful kids.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time that wasn't the case, but for a long time it was just 3 starving artist kids. But I think they just didn't discourage us, and they were always, my mom's an art teacher, my dad's a chiropractor. They were always really artistic themselves, taught us to question authority, basically.
Ooh, I know Alexis has a follow-up to that.
Well, I love the term nice chaos. I mean, because, when you come from a family like that, I don't think it's accidental. I think there's something deliberate. There's something in the DNA of the family that drives us. I don't think that's organic or accidental. I mean, it might be organic, who knows? But the fact that 3 of you are successful, and you being a female director in Hollywood, the chaos of being a female director. Last year, I think it was all men. I don't know if I'd call that a nice chaos. Where do you get, talk about that trajectory? And particularly, I think one of your earlier films was Diary of a teenage girl. And at that point, I mean, that kind of story about women was never told before. So, you know, I think there may be an audience of young girls who are watching this. So talk a little bit about that trajectory and what it takes to be as creative as you are in a world that doesn't always quite embrace that, particularly from women.
It's funny because I never set out to be a director. Really, I wanted to be an actor, and I spent many years being an actor. And
on stage and theater, right? On
mostly
stage
in theater, yeah. And I was frustrated. I was frustrated because I didn't feel like I was in enough creative control, is the truth of the matter. I just wasn't getting the parts that felt like juicy enough for me. I was kind of told like, well, you'll have to wait till you're in your 50s to get the really good, juicy female parts like Lady Macbeth or whatever. And I was just, as a 25-year-old, 28-year-old, I was just frustrated by the way women were portrayed in the new plays that were being written. And so I started writing really out of a desire to try to write more well-rounded female characters that I could play. And then I sort of fell in love with writing and really didn't think about directing. It was much more like I started writing, that kind of segued me into writing screenplays, and I wrote a few pilots, and I loved writing stories, and I loved mostly exploring female characters. And then when I was finally going to make Diary as a movie, after I'd been working on it for so many years, the thought of somebody else directing it just didn't sit well with me. So
it was your baby.
It was my baby. And I had been working on it for so many years. And I had fought so hard to get the rights to the book and to get the author of the book to trust me. And it was my vision that she trusted. And so the thought of handing that over to somebody else just made no sense. And so I really figured out how to direct. It's like almost if I had known how terrible the numbers were for women in directing, if I had known how hard it was to be a director in Hollywood, I probably wouldn't have sought that path out. But it was only because I kind of came to it sideways. And then once I was doing it, it was so clear how few of us that there were. It's funny because in many ways, directing is not chaos. Like it is very organized chaos, but directing is such an organized machine. You have so many people working to keep things organized. And if anything, you have to like work very hard because you are the manager, you are sort of the CEO of your little company when you're the director. You have to keep everything very organized, but still open to chaos, like still open to creativity, still open to things coming up. And that's sort of the weird trick of it, because on the surface, it actually seems like it's almost a managerial position. Like you're just keeping the trains running.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
You're the conductor of the symphony.
Yes. Yeah.
You're orchestrating all the parts in order for this thing to happen that appears seamlessly on the screen.
Right. And the days are so complex and you have so much to accomplish that a lot of what you're doing is you're picking your instruments or your musicians so that you have all these people you like to work with, and you're all collaborating and you're asking everybody to bring their best to the table. And then you're trying to create a space where everybody gets to do their work, but it's 200 people with different agendas.
Not having any role models. I mean, I'm thinking maybe you were writing scripts that you didn't want anyone to. You were writing scripts that you saw that you wanted to be an actor in, and eventually wanted to direct. Who were your role models? Who could you lean on and say, okay, here's a woman director, female director that at least, if nothing else, I can model my craft after?
I mean, I think most women, in the same way that most white people are really used to, most people of color are really used to associating with white men. Like a lot of us are used to putting us in the position or like associating ourselves with white men. I mean, my role models were more white men than they were women.
Interesting. Anyone in particular?
What?
Anyone in particular?
No one off the top of my head. I mean, but I think the thing is like in the same way that I realized when watching movies, the protagonists and the people that I related to tended to be white men, because those are the people whose stories we were putting forward, right? Those are the people whose stories Hollywood put forward. So we were all meant to associate with
Well,
that
I've
young
always
white guy.
identified, like I watch Mad Men, I'm like, wait, why do I identify with the male lead? Like, what's wrong
Because
with
you're
me?
supposed to. That's because they did their job. I mean, that's, you know, and hopefully I tell stories that tend to be about women, but hopefully that men can go, oh, I related to that 15-year-old girl. I felt like I was her. That's my favorite compliment, is when somebody who isn't exactly that person feels like they related to a character that you put on screen. And it's this really weird kind of stereotype we have that you have to only, that only people who, I don't know, people think the only people who are going to like movies about women are women. And it's just not true. Everybody, we've all been trained to identify with protagonists who look different than ourselves. I just don't believe it's true. It's part of it's part of what movies can do that's wonderful, is connect you to the humanity of another person.
Yeah, I think exactly that. The reason why we love books, the reason why we love music, you know, is because it speaks to us and something resonates deep inside, and you're like, you read a book and go, oh my God, I'm not the only one who feels that way.
Yeah.
Right? And there's a beauty in that. And you've done that in your films. And I remember I started reading some books and I'd send you like,
yeah,
they're like, why are you telling me to read this book? I'm like, no reason, just maybe read this book. And they made one like Little Fires Everywhere. So that was the author, right? So you have this way with your films to just, they're so beautiful and so intimate. And I think there's so much coming at us, so much information. You have such beautiful character development.
Mm-hmm.
And a way to just touch our soul. And you did that with Diary of a Teenage Girl, Can You Ever Forgive Me, right? I mean, brilliant. And then lastly with Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood. I mean, I don't know if this is a giveaway, but that one moment in the movie that was so intense, right? That demanded everyone in the audience to check themselves.
Yeah.
And I know that I sent you a letter after that. Your dad had written saying, how did this movie influence people? Did it change things? And on a personal note, like, it was me sitting there with my son and my soon-to-be ex-husband, right? And it was exactly what we needed. It opened up the door for forgiveness, right?
I know, that was so touching, the note that you wrote me about that.
Oh.
I heard that from so many people, which was the thing that you would hope. I mean, it is what I love in movies. I mean, I love all kinds of movies, but the kinds of movies I want to make hopefully shine a light on characters and on humanity and help us really feel what other people might be feeling, because I think that is what we're sort of missing in this day and age. And not all of our movies do that. I don't know. Not all of our movies make us feel more connected to humanity, more connected to the human experience.
Yeah.
But your characters are so complex. I mean, you know, you don't write, you know, a single, what do you call it? I'm losing the word. You don't write stereotypical character, one-dimensional.
One-dimensional, yeah.
I mean, I look at Melissa McCarthy, Can You Forgive Me? And I wanted to not like her so desperately. But yet I fell in love with her every moment. And so I love the complexity of the characters you introduce to us, because it's really a reflection of the real world. I mean, the people you love and the things you don't love about them, and you have to make moral judgment in terms of their intentionality. I kept going back to Melissa McCarthy's character in Can You Forgive Me Now? Can You Ever Forgive Me? And it's like, what's her intention? You know, where is this coming from? What's driving this behavior? And is her intention enough to challenge my moral compass? Can you talk about why that is such a, what are we going to call it, a signature of all your films? Your characters really makes the audience walk out of that theater thinking, should I have liked her?
I like complex characters. I think it's boring. I think it's boring to make movies about really easy to like characters. And I also, particularly with women, think the more complex women we show on screen, the better it is for everybody, because we get to show that women are as complex as men. We've had such wonderful complex male characters that we've seen over the years. So letting the main character of a movie, who is the, you know, in many ways I kept saying about that character, Lee Israel.
And by the way, hold on, sorry, don't lose your thought.
I won't.
that you actually did the shooting in the actual bookstore.
In
Where,
many of the bookstores where she really,
can you
yeah.
talk also? But I don't want you to lose your
Yeah.
train.
No, just that I kept referring to like Tony Soprano or like the great male tragic heroes that we've had over the years who we love, who are problematic people, who are not good, not perfect people, flawed humans. And whenever anybody would say like, are we worried that she's not likable? I'd say, why do we look at all these characters. We never ask if Tony Soprano is likable. Like the reason that you're invested in them is because they're special. There's something interesting about the way they see the world, their version of how the world should work. They're the smartest person in the room. They're the meanest person in the room. They're the most in pain person in the room, whatever it might be. But that's what I love about characters. And I think it does connect us more to our humanity when we see somebody that we recognize as being flawed, because then we can connect to them. When people are just perfect, when women are just perfect, when like, who can relate to that? When a woman just wakes up out of bed in the morning with like a full face of makeup on and perfect hair, I'm like, okay, you're not me. I can't relate to you. There's nothing I can do with this. But if we can see ourselves in the characters we see on screen, if they can be more diverse, if they can be a 51-year-old lesbian cat lady alcoholic who lives alone on the Upper West Side, and we can feel like that's me, then we're more connected to our humanity. Like if it's, you know, a 25-year-old hot blonde girl who's got a gun or something, like, I don't know, it just doesn't necessarily connect us to anything new. But yeah, when we did Can You Ever Forgive Me, we had a really neat experience of filming that movie in New York in the dead of winter, in bars, the real bars where Lee drank.
Yeah.
Julius Bar, which is like the oldest gay bar in New York, or that's what they say. It's a really great bar, and we actually got to film there. We got to talk to the bartenders who knew her and say, which stool did she sit on? What did she do? Like, and in all these bookstores where she really forged her letters, sold her forgeries, and got caught by the FBI. So that was really, it was neat. I mean, it was a cool experience.
How important?
A lot of,
No, go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, you also did so much research for the, you know, I mean, I always call it like the Mr. Rogers.
You can just say the Mr. Rogers movie. That's what I do too.
Beautiful Day in the Neighborhood.
It also had multiple names over the course of us working on it, so I was just saying Mr. Rogers.
And you did so. I mean, the amount of research that goes into the films that you're creating and directing. It's
yeah, that one is the most out of all of them, because Mr. Rogers' life was really well documented, and he had we filmed in Pittsburgh, where he's from, and where he really filmed the show. We got to film in the actual studio where they filmed Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. They have this extensive archive of all of his papers and letters, and he kept up with people over all the years that he was making that show. And he just was very organized and kept records of all of his stuff. We had more stuff than we could possibly make our way through. So it was really amazing.
I don't know if it's showing on the screen, but that was one of my favorite posts of your dad. Was he posted it and he said, "Who wore it better?" Right? When you showed up on set in the red.
Yep. It's true. I still wear the red sweater now sometimes because I love it and I have it, and it was a gift somebody gave me, and now it feels weird. Everybody makes a comment if I wear it now.
That quote's coming up a lot, though. The quote, you know, the quote that when things are bad, when things are tough, look for the helpers. Look for the helpers.
Yeah, it's probably his most quoted line.
And with everything that's going on, the current climate, I mean, we're seeing it's getting posted so much.
Yeah. So much. I mean, the truth is Mr. Rogers was a radical. He was really progressive. Yeah. And he was really somebody who truly loved humanity in such a deep way and really believed in the goodness in people and in bringing people together. It was an inspiration to get to work on his movie and to get to know him and know, you know, even though he's passed away, but his wife, I've gotten to know his wife, and we've stayed close through this whole time. And all the people who knew him and loved him. It was just an incredibly inspiring experience, because there aren't that many true heroes anymore that you feel like they don't, he just never disappointed. The more I got to know about him, the more impressed I was.
I heard Tom Hanks didn't sign on until he heard you were directing.
It is true. It was funny because when we were doing press for the movie, somebody said that he had passed on the script a number of times before.
Right, that's right.
Which was true, but the number kept getting higher and higher the more times we told the story of like, they sent him the script 18 times and he passed until probably he had read it once. And he passed because there was no director attached and he didn't understand what the vision of the movie would be. And then when I signed on and came to him with it, and we already kind of had this relationship going because he had seen my first movie, and we had a meeting, and he had been kind of keeping tabs on my career and wanting to work together. We'd been sending each other things over the years. So I feel like everyone in Alameda liked to say that it happened because we were both from Alameda.
Oh, you mean it didn't?
It's not really true, but I should give that one to Alameda. Let them feel like it was all about Alameda, the reason why he wanted to work.
Something's in the water in Alameda. Yep. Wow.
How do you direct Tom Hanks? How do you do that in a story where everybody knows the character, at least they think they do, and so how do you direct someone like Tom Hanks in that journey? I mean,
the beauty of somebody like Tom Hanks is he got to be who he is because he is a real actor who truly loves directors. He believes in the director's vision. So early on, we started conversations about what my version of Mr. Rogers would be within this, because you could go different ways. You could do more of an imitation. You could do something. You have prosthetics and the voice sounds just like it, and it's like more like an imitation, and I didn't want to do that. I was very aware that I wanted it to feel like the essence was right, but that he would disappear. We would just sink into it. We wouldn't be thinking about the imitation he was doing. If we were thinking about it, then we were losing. So we talked about that really early, and that the only thing I wanted was eyebrows, and that we would work on his hair to get it to look like Mr. Rogers, but that the rest of it was going to be about intention and emotionality. And so a lot of how I worked with him was the way I would work with any other actor, which is if he was doing a great job, I would say nothing. Or if he needed me to come in and just say, I want you to picture your granddaughter on the other side of this camera, and that's the only person you're going to speak to right now. Nobody else is here. Take a moment. When you're ready, we're going to go. I would give him one little thought and kind of try to clue him in to wherever he needed to be emotionally. And he's so good that but I'm pretty hands-on with directors. With actors, I will say, as a director goes, like, actors have told me, like, yeah, you tried us kind of hard. I think it's because I am an actor that I'm like, come on, I know how this works. We can talk about this. Let's work this out.
Can you oh, sorry, Amanda. Sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, I was going to mention one of the most exciting interviews, because again, I see a lot of things through your social media, but then also through your dad. And one of my favorite moments was watching your interview at the round table.
Oh yeah.
So I think I have the visual. This is Marty crushing it, right? At the round table. And
is that
someone's cut out of there?
Can you see it?
Yeah.
And it was a moment of, this whole week has been a moment of just pride, of seeing friends just do great things and be successful. But I'm gonna use the woman card right now and just say, F yeah. You at that table surrounded by other brilliant people, and the way you just held yourself in that interview was so amazing. What was it like being at that table? And okay, I'll just let you speak.
I probably went in there. I obviously went in there knowing I was the only woman. But Ryan Coogler and I are buddies. Like, we went through the Sundance Labs together. So I had a friend at the table, who's from the Bay Area. He went to St. Mary's,
Oh, snap. Okay.
where my husband went for 2 years too.
I'm like, where the cute boys were, right? On
Yeah.
the back. St. Mary's.
So that was nice because it was like I didn't have another woman there, but I had a buddy, and it meant that I felt safe. And actually, my favorite thing to do is to talk to other directors. I mean, we never get to do it. You always direct alone. So you actually very rarely get to talk to other directors about what they go through. So I felt like I was amongst a bunch of friends and we were getting to have a nice conversation for the most part. I mean, it was, a little bit intimidating, but talking to other people about things they love, that's just nice.
I understand.
How important is validation? I mean, in 2012, you were the Sundance Screenwriters Fellow. On the red carpet, I think last year, where no women directors were nominated, Natalie Portman wore a dress on the red carpet with all the women directors' names on it to make a profound statement. Yeah. And so how important is validation of your work? And what's the upside of validation as a female director? And what's the downside of that validation as a female director?
I mean, I struggle with this because on one hand, part of me goes, that's the bullshit part of this whole business, is the sort of needing, it's the ego, right? It's not the actual work. It's not the craft. It's not the job that we're there to do. In so many ways, I believe a lot of my job is to be a little bit invisible as the director. Mm-hmm. I'm there to make something feel seamless and to not make it, and to tell a story in the way the story demands, but to not make it all about me. And I just feel like it's gross. Like a lot of it's gross. A lot of the award shows and I did it 2 years in a row because Can You Ever Forgive Me was nominated for 3 Oscars. And because Tom Hanks was nominated for an Oscar for Mr. Rogers' movie and a lot of other awards. Both of them were nominated for a lot of other awards. So you kind of go on this like circuit where you're going to all the awards and you're doing all the same events with all the other directors. And the truth is, it's all these people who you want to be friends with, who you love, who you're like, why are we being pitted against each other? You made it a piece of art that has nothing to do with the piece of art I made. Right. And how can we even say one piece of art is better than another? It just makes no sense. So on one hand, I feel that, and I think about Mr. Rogers all the time. And I tried to check my ego constantly of like, this is not true. This is not the work. And on the other hand, I know as a woman, being visible matters. Doing the job that I do. And I want to represent, I want to like show up and help open doors because I know that I'm only there because of the hundreds of women directors who came before me who got zero validation in their life and in their careers, who pushed the door open so that I could be there. So on one hand, I feel this responsibility to be like a representative. Mm-hmm. And I take that seriously. Like I want to do that. I want to show up. I want to be as present as I can. I want to win if I can win so that other women can win. I want to fight the fight. Like I don't want to take a back seat. I don't want to pretend I'm invisible because people aren't willing to necessarily notice people of color or women or non-binary people in this business. So I take that part very seriously, but I struggle with those two pieces. I don't know how to always...
You're human. You're human, yeah. Right? Yeah. And we grow up.
And there's an economy to validation. I mean, validation means you get a bigger budget to do the next film. Yes. I mean, there's an economy to that. Right?
As my friend Lulu Wong, who directed The Farewell, pointed that out to me when I was kind of going on a rant about it being all ego. And she said, but don't forget, women and especially people of color get bigger budgets and get more opportunity when they have these check marks off where they've gotten this award or whatever. And I was like, that is true. That's fair.
Mari, I know we don't have much more time left and I want to be respectful. No, I know what you mean though, because it's funny. Like I don't ever prepare for these interviews because I want them to be fresh and like you just walked into the cafe and we're having a conversation. It's a virtual social club. And I always thought I'd be so nervous having this one with you. I don't know why.
Really?
Well, because of your stature as you know, you're a Hollywood director and the people that are around you. And I realized, like, before getting on, I went and rode my bike around the neighborhood a few times. I was like, you know what? Like, I'm not nervous because, like you just said, when you were at that table with the directors, like, we're just talking and we're friends, and this is my wheelhouse, right? I was more nervous hosting the astrophysicist, right? Because I'm like, oh my God, he's going to say some science thing and it's not going to resonate. So I wanted to talk about influence and responsibility, because just as you said, you want to show up and you want to be there for women, but you've got a global platform. And what's the weight of that? I mean, being under the public eye, you know, you've got your son and you're trying to protect him at times and live a balanced life. And, you know, like you said, check your ego. What's that like though? Because people are going to start listening to you more and more. And how do you use that power and that influence? And what do you want to do with it?
I feel like, I mean, you knew me growing up. I feel like I've sort of always been an outspoken activist in certain ways. And the ways that that has sort of coincided with my career have been very natural. I've ended up kind of fighting for certain things without even really thinking about them. And then realizing along the way that part of what I was fighting for had to do with something that felt inherently unfair to me. You know, one thing that I fought for on this last movie was doing shorter work hours. And so we filmed French hours, which meant skipping lunch and filming straight through. And the whole reason I did that, and the whole speech I gave to the studio about why I wanted to do that, was I said, you know, if you want more women to direct, we need to stop pretending that most of us are not mothers and that we're not trying to balance so many things in our lives. And we need to make this a more sustainable career choice for us. And I would make more movies if I could make movies in this way. And it ended up being something that I like talked about in press and went to my union about. And I've had so many people reach out to me and say what it meant to them. But that really just came from my own life of like, I want to be home to put my kid to bed at night. And I don't want to feel like I have to choose between being a successful director and being a successful mom. So, or a trying to be successful mom. I don't think any of us feel like successful parents, but
You know, like, you should see the pre-show before we go live, right?
Yeah. But it's like these kind of things that just, I never really try to step out from what feels like the natural things that I want to put myself out there for. You know, a lot of also what I fight for is equality on the set in terms of who I want to cast and who I want to hire along racial lines and along gender lines. And that just sort of has come naturally to what I believe makes for the best workforce. So it's not something where I'm putting myself in a position to fight for something I don't believe in. It's just the things I truly believe in. And the moment I got into a position where I realized I had a little bit of power, I was like, oh, I could do this the way I want to do it. I'm going to try to do that. And I still have to remind myself of that, of like, oh no, I could demand this, or I could say, this is how we're going to do this on this movie. We're going to do this a different way. And, you know, I'm still like figuring out what comes with that power. Because I think, like almost every artist, I spent the majority of my life struggling to get to this position. And it's hard to sort of believe when you're actually the one leading the troops.
Yeah. You know, one of the things I think that makes a leader, how do I want to say it, an effective leader outside of the egoic self is the will to create change. And oftentimes you have someone who is there. They would want to do it. They would have a desire. When you talk about women directors, I think of men in the room who may want to speak up for the rights of women directors to be on parity with men, but they don't have the will to do it because it's too costly for them to do it. Right. And so I find that as you're speaking, you're so representational of your characters because your characters always have the will to do what they want to do, or at least think that is their moral compass. And in spite of all the odds, Mr. Rogers, all your characters, you know, there is this will to express. Do you take on roles consciously or maybe unconsciously that is representational of who you are?
I'm sure I do. I mean, I think no matter what, the characters in my movies have to be people that I love and relate to. And
Okay.
that goes for every character in every movie I've made, is somebody who I feel like is me, or some version of me. And, you know, making the Mr. Rogers movie, it was the first time I was making a movie about, really just about men, but I really felt like the two men represented parts of myself that I felt very connected to. The cynic and the eternal optimist, the sensitive optimist who wants the world to be a better place for everybody, and who, you know, I found myself so connected to both of who these two characters were in these weird ways. And the fight that I have within myself between those two parts of myself were just so represented in who they were. So yeah, I like to put people on screen who I feel like I'm who I want to see, or people I feel like I don't get to see as often but who feel like me a little bit.
Yeah, and the power of their story, the power of storytelling to shift a narrative, to shift the world, to shift how I see myself in relationship to the world, and the courage it takes not only to tell my story, but to live my story.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, Mr. Rogers' movie particularly felt like it was like trying to convince the world that we wanted to make a movie about feelings and about not about a lot of things happening, but just about emotional change and growth, and what happens when somebody actually tries to open their heart to becoming a better man and a better father and a better husband.
That's antithetical to Hollywood. That must have been an uphill push.
Luckily, I mean, once you've got Tom Hanks on, you're pretty good. And Lori, look at the timing. I know we have to wrap it up.
Don't worry, Amanda, don't worry. It'll take us 4 minutes, it's fine. I just got to get upstairs to say goodnight to my kid before he goes.
So I'm just thinking of the timing, and when you're talking about influence, and you go back to validation, like, well, I didn't get the award, and sometimes it's like, is it the award or is it the impact you had on millions of lives around the world? And I just think like your movie was a gift, because we're all stuck, right? We're all being forced on this inward journey.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, why am I crying? This is your segment.
I love it.
Cry. But the timing, right? You forced everyone to stop and check themselves. And then it opened the door for forgiveness. It opened the door for self-exploration, like you're saying, to talk about feelings. And that's what everyone collectively around the world is going through right now. And now with the civil unrest, right? We as white women, like, we have to check ourselves. And I know, we kind of went back and forth when you discovered, like, oh, wait, this is white privilege. And you shared it publicly. Jenny Hall was on last night. She's an ER doctor now. And Alexis said, well, how do you raise 3 white boys? And how do we raise our boys in this world? And one of the conversations we have, and she said, well, I tell my kids that it's like they have Willy Wonka's golden ticket, but they didn't earn it. Yep. And it was like, wow. So it's just, I think the timing of your film couldn't have been better. So validation.
True, though. It's exactly what we were trying to do with the movie for this, like, heterosexual white man, was to show what it is when you lower your defenses and let yourself be open to change. Yeah. And it's so hard for all of us, right? And I think you're watching white people across the US right now have that exact struggle within themselves of like, how do I not jump to defensiveness, or how do we stay open and listen and feel like we can be open to shift. But real change, I mean, we look at this period of time and you think, is this going to be the moment? Like, is this real change? Are we here? Are we there? Like, is it going to last?
You were in 7th grade. I was in 8th grade when Rodney King riots went on, right? And so that was.
And everyone in LA right now is saying that's how LA feels. It feels identical.
That's right.
I know.
You know, when you talk about empathy, one of the things that strikes me is the invitation to have a new definition of self.
Mm.
That I look at myself through my ego, it's all about me. I'm my definition of self. When I look at myself through the human experience, I have a broader definition of self. I've got a friend who's a scientist, and he's probably looking, so I'm saying this a bit gratuitously. He fights for the nuclear power plant, San Onofre. And his thing is, at some point, this is going to be the next virus. Nuclear waste will be the next virus that actually impacts Southern California. And when I sit with him as a scientist, I see the scientist because he is, Amanda knows him. He's beautifully brilliant. And I take his intellect and I put it over here. And what I see is a man who deeply cares. I see the Mr. Rogers within him. That here's this intellect that speaks to the intellectual, technical aspect of nuclear waste. And at the same time, when I move his intellect to the side, he's so deeply and profoundly connected to other human beings that his definition of self isn't me, it's my relationship with humanity. And so I think
that was my first positive thought when the coronavirus began, and was I thought, okay, so we're not going to be able to ignore that we're all connected to each other anymore. Like that now we see it. It's been physicalized. We're watching the web. Like it's all there as a globe.
Yeah.
But nobody got it. It didn't feel like it didn't
have to a movie.
It didn't like sink in the way that I was sort of hoping when this began, that we would start to recognize our personal responsibility. And like you're saying, the fact that self is ego and that we're actually truly connected to each other and we're all part of the same organism in some way. And like, how do we, and obviously I feel like what is happening right now is just a call out for that connectedness and for humanity to say, like, don't you see we are connected? Don't you see we are the same? My pain is your pain. This is all one. But it's like, we're so individualistic, especially in this country. I think even more so than in other countries. It's like, we are just so about the individual that how do we get out of that? Like, how do we break that as a driving force, as a concept, and as our sense of self? I don't know, but it's true. I mean, I can imagine nuclear power being this great unifier in some weird way, like coronavirus is, of like, we're all connected. We're all vulnerable.
Yeah. And we're all susceptible. Like you said, we're vulnerable, and Alexis often says it doesn't see color, it doesn't see gender, it doesn't see sexual orientation, it doesn't see age. Like it's incredible. Yeah. Mari, what's your next venture? Are you gonna take? I mean, everyone's probably dying. If I don't ask it, then Mia is upset. She's gonna come down and be like, "Auntie, I can't believe it."
I don't know what the next movie I will make is the truth. And I actually am having like a very hard time envisioning what making movies is going to look like in the next few years.
Absolutely.
I was in the middle of running a writer's room when this all happened. And actually I was already in a sort of place where I felt like I needed to have some time to reflect and like recharge creatively, because I made 3 movies within 6 years, which is actually insane.
Like virtual high five.
Yes.
With a kid. With a kid. It's,
most movies take at least 2 to 3 years to make, and I made 3 just back to back. So I already was like, I need a refresh year. Like I need a year of writing and reflecting and kind of returning to what I want to do, especially after the whole award thing, which is really the antithesis of creativity. So that was sort of my plan for the year. And then I got pregnant. And so then that was like, okay, well, great. Then I'll do that too. And then, so I was writing, I was leading a group of all female writers for adapting an episode of This American Life into a limited series. And so we've been writing that, and we don't know when we can go into production on it. But,
what made you say yes to that project? What made you, I know This American Life, it's on NPR. Yeah, what made you say yes to
episode, it's an episode called Five Women. That's about five women who are all come forward in a sexual assault or sexual harassment suit against their boss. And it's sort of a very, very mundane, not flashy, not famous Me Too story, which I liked. Like it's just like any office in any place and the normal small ways that women get treated. And it's a really moving episode, and it seemed to make a lot of sense to me as like a kind of a deeper dive into the complexities of some of these workplace situations and how women can all bring their own lives to the table. They can bring their histories, and it can affect how they react in that moment. So that's really what it's about, is like these different women bringing their own histories to the table of like how they react when they're treated a certain way, and how they judge each other at times, and how they're allies and how they're not.
Lindsay just talked about that today.
Verbatim.
Yeah. Really?
She just talked about that. She said, there's women directors, some are great. She's like, and some are not so great, and she's like, but then I also have to check myself. Like, am I being an ally? Or, are we, and I was like, oh yes, you want the lifter uppers. That's interesting.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So, it spoke to me. It just made sense as an idea. And so we've been developing it, and I got to like bring on a group of writers and work together, which was really fun. And now we've all been off writing our own scripts. And so that will happen at some point when we know how to go back to work. And in the meantime, I have two things that'll come out in the fall that are, one thing that I think I'm allowed to talk about it. I don't know. I might not be able to. I maybe not. I'll say one thing that is going to come out in the fall is I acted in something last year, which was the first time I've acted in 10 years.
Wow.
Nice.
Yeah.
How did it feel to be in front of the camera?
It was super fun. It was so fun. But I'm really good friends with the director, and I really trusted him, and it would have been a totally different story if it was like I didn't actually trust the director. And he and I have like visited each other's sets before, and we are just total buddies. And so it felt really, really safe. And it was just a ball, because it's a lot less responsibility than being a director.
Oh, that's so wonderful to hear. It's like you're back on stage, right?
Yeah, it was really fun. So that's like a series that I'm going to be in that's going to come out on Netflix in the fall. So,
what are the values you got? Go ahead, finish.
No, it's fun that I'll be at home taking maternity leave, but it'll seem like I was working because it'll come out.
What do you know now as a director that you wish you knew earlier? What do you wish you...
If I can take the knowledge I had as a director and put it back into my 23-year-old actor self, I mean, it's a totally different... All the knowledge I have as a director about how little, you show up on set when you're an actor and you have no idea what's going on. Like, you have no idea the 200 people who are running around, or how you can participate and help the bigger machine work. And if I had a better sense of that, I think then you can do your job so much better. So going to set now as an actor, I'm like, oh, I know what they need. I know why they need me here at 4 a.m. so that we can get this shot early. I know how to make sure that I'm not the one holding this up. I know how to make sure, I know how to be a team player and be part of this process, rather than kind of just showing up and feeling overwhelmed and like everyone's looking at me, I got to do my job right. It's just, now I can understand the collaboration of it all in a totally different way. And I can understand how much is riding on you as an actor, that you think you're the center of things, but the truth is everyone else has been working for months just for the moment that you show up to do this one little thing. Doesn't mean it's easy. You have to do it, and you have to show up in the moment and do it in the moment. That's really hard, but everyone else has worked a lot harder than you.
I think we learned that launching Bellevue TV in the middle of the quarantine. Yes, I can relate. I think we could all relate to that.
Yeah, totally.
I'm so happy you were my neighbor. You have no idea.
I know. We had a great neighborhood.
We had a great neighborhood, and I think also it was a combo. We talked about it earlier all week long. Like sports was a part of it, dance was a part of it, athletics was a part of it, Franklin Park was a part of it. Our families, like community, is just it was
Yeah,
such.
the whole parks department. I worked for the parks department for years.
You did ARPD?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, right
Yeah.
on.
Starting when I was like 13 or 14, I was a counselor with the day camps, and then I went to work at the parks. Yeah. I did the daycare in different parks like Godfrey and stuff. And I mean, you know, that talk about community, it's like the parks department was just like, we all grew up in the parks. We all grew up using these kind of facilities and like all of the programs and going to the camps and going to the, being part of that. And then also I came home through college and did that over the summers too.
Oh, so cool.
Before you leave, we've talked about a lot of men, but we haven't spoken about the one man, your hubby. Tell us a bit about him. Stand-up comedian. Is there any chance of a collaboration? Is there any chance of
director? I mean, he's the reason that I became a director in so many ways, because I got to see him on set and got to see. He didn't go to film school either. We met in theater school more than 20 years ago. And, you know, I watched him and his friends figure out how to forge their own path, and got hired to SNL by doing all these little digital shorts that they were just making on their own for no money. And it, in so many ways, was like such a good blueprint for me to see how to just do it on your own and not wait for other people to let you do things, and that nobody really knows what they're doing. And you can
do it, just go for it.
Do it. Yeah. And so, and I got to see him on set, and that really kind of taught me. And he's a very similarly kind director on set who keeps things in a really positive place and who makes everybody feel like they're at home and makes people like creates a place where people can do their best work. And so, although we make very different things, and I don't think we will probably ever make anything together. Although
I think you already have.
Yes, yeah, we've made some humans, but also he was a producer on Diary, and he was a big reason that I got that movie made. And he worked really, really hard to make Diary happen.
Should we say his name? Should we say his name?
Yeah, Yorma Taccone.
Oh my gosh, I'm just looking now at your Zoom, and I forgot to change your name. So it says Jorma.
Oh, it says Yorma on there. Oops, yeah, I'm on his computer. My computer's
a good producer, right? On top of it.
I should have changed it.
Sorry, we've had a bunch of kids on, and we really will wrap it up right now. We had a bunch of kids on all week from St. Joe's, which is just this high school we went to. Galen Whittemore is coming on later this evening. We had Jenny Hall was on, Neloy and John Gordon. And so it's been fun because all week long people are learning about our friends, our circle. And I think, you know, Alexis as well, like they're getting to peek into what our past was like and how our family, our community, our school shaped us.
Yeah.
Who were your teachers? I think teachers are a big part of it. I know I was in like honors English, and I love my teachers. Who were
your me too. Miss Norris, Miss Dempsey. Yeah.
Miss McKelly, was she as well?
Yeah, Miss McKelly, yep. Madame Kuzmin was my French teacher who I like traveled to France with too, and still I'm friends with on FaceTime. Dr. Vike.
Oh, PD.
Yeah. And you know, Miss Conniff passed away this week.
Yeah.
We had like a beloved teacher pass away from our school this week. Yeah, I mean, it's been neat because I've stayed weirdly connected to some of these teachers through Facebook, which is kind of fun and odd. And when I went back and did the St. Joe's graduation last year and spoke at their graduation and saw Mr. Fong, and he took me back to see their new chemistry lab. And it was like it's so different to be an adult, and you just feel like a kid when you go back to your high school, no matter what.
Who haven't you worked with that you'd like to work with? Who's your dream team to come?
There are so many amazing actors who I'm dying to work with, but I'm in a weirdly very, very privileged position where actors want to work with me now. I think I've gotten a little bit of a reputation from people like Melissa and Tom Hanks, where people are like, oh yeah, she's an actor's director. You want to work with her. So I don't feel like
you earned it. Own it, because you earned it. Okay.
very cool.
Hi there.
But I don't feel like anyone's like out of reach now. It's that nice feeling of like, oh no, I can work with whoever I want to work with. Like,
is there one in particular you'd love to? Is there one or two or three or 10 that you're just itching to do something with?
I had a really, really nice conversation with Kate Blanchett a few weeks ago, and I'm like, she's just incredible. I've always loved her work, and
extraordinary.
That was awesome. Maybe I'll work with her someday. That would be fun.
I'll carry the suitcases. I absolutely love her. I absolutely love her. That would be a collaboration. Yeah. I tell Amanda, I said, and I'll say this again, there's something that happened to that class in Alameda during Amanda's time, that the signature of that time seems to be throughout everyone we've interviewed this week, all from Alameda. And it seems to be this sense of groundedness. It seems to be a sense of integration and collaboration that didn't remain in Alameda. It seems like Amanda, if ever you've been to Bella Vista, it's representational of the value system of Alameda. I hear you speak. We had Lindsay on earlier. We've had Jeremy on. We've had a host of people, all students that Amanda grew up with as playmates and as classmates. And that signature from whatever happened at that time just seems to have been portable and has pollinated the world in different sectors and in different professions. So I've told Amanda, I've gotten to know her better through you and Jeremy and Lindsay and everybody else. But you are so grounded and you're so honest. You're so antithetical to everything we hear about Hollywood.
Yeah. Everything you hear about Hollywood is right. It's true.
So I don't know if you are an
I do think that has a lot to do with where we're from. I mean, I think the Bay Area is a place that, I mean, definitely individualism and honesty and humbleness is kind of part of what's baked into it as a place. And it's just the value system that we're kind of taught from being there. And I think, mix that with good parents, and hopefully that leads to people who stay grounded no matter where their lives take them.
Yeah.
Where I'm from, dang, you brought it home. And that's the title, and we're #hella proud. All right, thank you guys so much. I'm gonna signal off live, and then I'm very sure Victor and Darlene are coming down.
Yeah, I'll wait.
To say a very quick hello. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And we are, I guess you would just say, we're hella proud. So you guys talk amongst yourselves. I'm going to figure out how to turn this off.
All right.